My name is Eleanor Wilson. I'm 68 years old, and I overheard my only son and his wife plotting to put me in a nursing home and steal the house I built with my late husband. What they didn't know was that my husband, a man who always planned for every possibility, had left me one final gift that would unravel their entire world. It's a long story, but it's one I feel compelled to share. Perhaps there's someone out there, in the quiet of their own home, who needs to hear it. Before I begin, I'd love to know where you're all listening from. It's a little past noon here in Ohio, on a day that started just like any other. Let me know in the comments what time it is in your corner of the world. It makes this vast world feel a little smaller, a little more connected, doesn't it? The day my world split in two began with the mundane scent of roasted chicken. It was a Tuesday, a day so painfully ordinary, it's hard to believe it now holds the stark dividing line of my life, the before and the after. I'd just finished my weekly grocery run at Kroger's. The cart was filled with the usual comforts of a quiet life. A gallon of 2% milk, bananas that were still a little green at the stems, a rotisserie chicken for an easy dinner, and a hefty bag of birdseed for the boisterous cardinals that held court at the feeder outside my kitchen window. It was a life of quiet routines, the kind you gratefully settle into after the grand, noisy chapters have closed. My husband, Thomas, had been gone for 3 years, and the silence in our home was a presence I had learned to live with, like a constant, low hum in the background of my days. Driving home, my old Buick gliding through familiar streets, I took a different route. I still can't explain why. Sometimes you just get a feeling, a little nudge from the universe, or perhaps just a stray thought telling you to turn left instead of right. The new route took me down Sycamore Lane, a street of tidy lawns and burgeoning maple trees, the kind of place young families move to when they want good schools and safe sidewalks. It was the street my son, Michael, lived on, with his wife, Vanessa. I rarely drove this way. It felt like checking up on them, and I never wanted to be that kind of mother. But today, that nudge was insistent. And that's when I saw it. His dark blue Ford Explorer, the one I'd proudly helped him with the down payment for after his last promotion, was parked right in the driveway, gleaming under the afternoon sun. A cold, heavy knot formed in the pit of my stomach. That couldn't be right. Just that morning, Michael had called, his voice filled with a kind of strained, artificial cheerfulness that I'd started noticing lately. "Hey, Mom! Just wanted to let you know Vanessa and I are heading out of town for that marketing conference in Chicago. A big opportunity for her. We'll be gone all week. Don't you worry about a thing, okay? We'll call you when we get there." I had pictured them on the interstate, listening to some true crime podcast Vanessa was obsessed with, the city receding in their rearview mirror. But there was his car. There was no conference. The lie was so blatant, so utterly unnecessary. It felt like a physical slap. Why lie about something so simple? My first instinct, the instinct of a lifetime spent keeping the peace, was to just keep driving. Pretend I hadn't seen it. It's what I'd always done. I was a conflict avoider, a smoother of ruffled feathers. Thomas used to tease me about it gently. "Ellie," he'd say with a shake of his head, "you would apologize to a brick wall if you bumped into it." But that nudge, the one that made me turn down this street, it wouldn't let me go. It held me there, idling in the middle of the quiet suburban street. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. I parked my car around the corner, out of sight, my heart thudding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I felt foolish, like a nosy old woman in a cheap detective novel, but I had to know. I walked slowly, my comfortable grocery store loafers silent on the sidewalk. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead. It was a perfect spring day, cruelly beautiful. Their living room window was partially open, a thin slice of darkness against the white siding, to let in the mild air. I didn't have to get close. Their voices carried, sharp and clear in the quiet afternoon. Vanessa's voice came first, edged with an impatience that was all too familiar. "We have to do this quickly, Michael. We can't drag this out. She's old, but she's not stupid. She'll figure it out if we give her too much time to think." My breath caught in my throat. My blood ran cold. She, the casual, dismissive pronoun, hit me like a stone. They were talking about me. Then came Michael's voice, my son's voice, laced with that familiar weakness I knew all too well, the one I'd spent a lifetime making excuses for. He was talking about me as if I were a piece of aging, inconvenient furniture to be disposed of, a problem to be managed and put away. I backed away from the window, my hand clamped over my mouth to stifle a cry. I stumbled back to my car, my legs feeling like they were made of cotton and sand. I don't remember the drive home. I remembered the smell of the rotisserie chicken in the back seat, a smell of simple, happy dinners that now seemed like a grotesque mockery. I remember pulling into my garage, the garage Thomas so proudly organized with neat pegboards for his tools, everything in his place, and just sitting there, in the driver's seat, the engine off, as the full, crushing weight of the betrayal settled over me. They weren't just planning to take my home, a structure of wood and nails and memories. They were planning to take my life, my independence, my very identity, and replace it with a room in a facility called Oakwood Meadows. The name itself sounded like a final, manicured chapter. And my son? My only child, the center of my universe for 42 years, was letting it happen. He was holding the door open for the thieves. That night, the house I had loved for 45 years felt alien. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a mausoleum of a life I thought I had. Every object I looked at was a ghost, a testament to my foolish, trusting heart. I wandered from room to room, a stranger in my own home, my hand trailing along the walls as if to make sure they were real. There was the armchair in the living room where Thomas used to sit, reading the paper every morning, the worn leather still holding the faint indentation of his body. I ran my hand over the armrest and could almost feel the warmth of him, hear the rustle of the newspaper. There, on the mantelpiece, was the framed photo from our 40th anniversary cruise to Alaska. Me in a ridiculous blue parka, Thomas with his arm wrapped tightly around me, both of us smiling, a genuine, unburdened smile that seemed to belong to two other people from another lifetime. And next to it, a picture of a 5-year-old Michael, beaming with a missing front tooth, holding up a messy painting of a rainbow he'd made for me at school. "For the bestest mom in the world," he had written in wobbly letters. My heart clenched so tightly I thought it might shatter into 1,000 pieces. Where did that little boy go? When did his heart grow so cold? I couldn't eat the chicken. I couldn't even bring the groceries in from the car. The thought of milk and bananas felt like an insult. I sank onto the cold linoleum of the kitchen floor, my back pressed against the cabinets, and finally let the tears come. They weren't loud, stormy sobs, but silent, scalding tears of a profound and absolute grief. They tracked down my cheeks and dripped onto my blouse, leaving small, dark spots. I cried for my lost husband, for his absence that felt sharper and more painful tonight than ever before. I cried for my son, the boy I had raised, who had somehow become a stranger to me. And I cried for myself, for the naive, trusting woman who had believed that a mother's love was an unbreakable shield against the world. My phone buzzed on the counter, a jarring electronic sound in the heavy silence. I ignored it. It buzzed again, insistent. With trembling hands, I reached for it. It was a text from Michael. "Hey, Mom, just checking in. Chicago is great but exhausting. Hope you're doing okay. Love you." The casual cruelty of it, the breezy, effortless lie typed out while he was just 10 miles away, plotting the dismantling of my life, was the final twist of the knife. For a wild, desperate moment, my thumb hovered over his name. I could call him. I could scream, cry, plead. "Michael, why? What did I do wrong? Please don't do this to me." I wanted to believe it was all a terrible misunderstanding, that Vanessa was some kind of villain from a soap opera who had him under her spell, a spell that a mother's love could break. But I knew better. I knew my son's weaknesses as well as I knew my own. I knew his desperate need for approval, his crippling fear of failure, and his lifelong tendency to take the path of least resistance. Vanessa was the engine of this monstrous plan, but Michael was the one willingly providing the fuel. Just as I was about to give in to that despair, to curl up on the floor and let the darkness swallow me whole, the doorbell rang. The chime echoed through the house, so unexpected it made me jump. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand and stumbled to the door, peering through the peephole. It was Sarah, my neighbor, and my closest friend for over 30 years. She was holding a Tupperware container, her face set in its usual cheerful expression. I opened the door, and the look on her face told me I must have been a sight. Her smile faltered, replaced by immediate concern. "Ellie? Honey, are you all right? I made too much of my 5-bean chili and thought, what on earth is wrong?" She bustled inside, her presence a sudden burst of warm, no-nonsense energy in my cold, quiet house. She took one look at my tear-streaked face, the untouched grocery bags by the door, and guided me to the kitchen table as if I were a child. I told her everything. The words tumbled out in a choked, messy torrent. The detour, the open window, Vanessa's sharp, cutting voice, Michael's weak, compliant replies. When she finished, she didn't offer empty platitudes. Sarah was never one for that. She reached across the table and took my hand, her grip firm and grounding. "That ungrateful little weasel. And as for her, I never did like that woman. All ambition and no heart." She leaned forward, her gaze intense. "Okay, so here's how I see it. You have two choices. You can sit here and cry, let them walk all over you, and end up in some beige room at Oakwood Meadows. Or you can fight." "Fight? How, Sarah? He's my son." "And you're his mother," she said with a ching in her voice. "A role you've fulfilled beautifully your entire life. You and Thomas worked their fingers to the bone for that boy. You poured your savings into his first business when the bank turned him down. You paid for his ridiculous lavish wedding to that woman because he said it was her dream. You started his college fund the day he was born. This house is your home. It's Thomas's legacy. It's the life you built together. Thomas would not want you to see this like. He would be horrified. He would want you to fight." Her words, especially the mention of Thomas, were like a splash of icy water to the face. She was right. Thomas had been a fighter, a planner, a man who met every challenge head-on with integrity and strength. He would be so disappointed to see me crumpled on the kitchen floor, a victim waiting for the end. The image of his disappointed face was more powerful than any self-pity. The tears stopped. The hollow ache in my chest began to fill with something else, something hard and cold and heavy. It was anger, a slow-burning, deep-seated anger I hadn't felt in years. It was the anger of a woman who had given everything and was about to have it all stolen. Sarah saw the change in my eyes, the subtle straightening of my spine. She gave my hand a firm squeeze. "So, what are you going to do, Eleanor Wilson?" I stood up, my back a little straighter than it had been all day. I walked over to the counter and picked up my phone. But I didn't scroll to Michael's name. I scrolled down to the letter B. "I'm going to call my lawyer," I said. And for the first time since I'd turned onto Sycamore Lane, my voice didn't tremble at all.
The next morning, I drove to the offices of Bennett and Hayes, a law firm housed in a stately old brick building downtown that exuded a sense of permanence and stability. The air inside smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and the quiet, unassailable dignity of the law. Charles Bennett had been more than just Thomas's lawyer for the mundane things like wills and property deeds. He'd been a true friend, a golfing buddy from his university days, a man who had stood beside me at Thomas's funeral, his own face as grief-stricken as my own. He was a link to the life that had been stolen from me, and I prayed he could help me protect what was left. When I was shown into his office, he stood up from behind his massive mahogany desk, his expression one of warm concern that immediately put me at ease. "Eleanor, it's good to see you, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Please, sit. What can I do for you?" I sat in the plush leather chair opposite him, a chair that had held countless people with their own stories of grief and conflict, and for the second time in less than 24 hours, I told the whole ugly story. I left nothing out: the lie about Chicago, the whispers through the window, the talk of power of attorney, the final cruel text message. As I spoke, Charles's warm expression slowly hardened. The friendly concern in his eyes was replaced by a grim disbelief, which then sharpened into a steely professional resolve. He listened without interruption, his fingertips steepled together, his gaze never leaving my face. When I finished, my voice hoarse, he was silent for a long moment. He took off his glasses and polished them with a handkerchief, a habit he had when he was thinking deeply. "I am so sorry, Eleanor," he said, his voice low and laced with a quiet fury on my behalf. "Truly, deeply sorry. No mother should ever have to endure such a thing. To be betrayed by your own child, it's unthinkable." He leaned forward, placing his hands flat on the desk. "First, let me set your mind at ease on one critical front. Thomas was a meticulous man. You know that. He loved you very much, and he was fiercely protective of you. The house is held in a specially designed irrevocable trust. Your name is the only one on it as the primary beneficiary and sole trustee. Michael is listed as a secondary beneficiary, meaning he inherits after you're gone, but he has zero power, let me repeat that, zero power to sell, mortgage, or transfer the property as long as you are alive and of sound mind. They can look for loopholes all they want. There are none. Thomas and I made sure of it." A wave of relief washed over me, so potent, it almost made me dizzy. It was a small victory, but it was a concrete one. A wall they couldn't breach. "So they can't take the house?" "Legally, absolutely not," Charles said. "But what you described, the talk of power of attorney, of proving you're forgetful, that's a different, uglier battle. It's not fought with deeds and titles. It's a battle of perception, of manipulation. They can try to make your life so miserable that you give in, or they can try to build a case, however flimsy, that you are no longer competent. We need to be prepared for that." And that was the heart of it. This wasn't just about property. It was about my very autonomy. I took a deep breath, the air feeling a little less heavy in my lungs. "I don't want them to know that I know," I said, surprising myself with my own newfound clarity. "Not yet. I want to understand exactly what I'm up against. I want to see how far they're willing to go." Charles nodded, a flicker of distinct admiration in his eyes. "Good. That's the right move. Never let your opponent know the strength of your hand. Information is power." He paused, a thoughtful look on his face. "Eleanor, do you remember Thomas ever talking about his digital legacy box?" The question caught me off guard. I vaguely remember Thomas mentioning it a year or so before he passed. He had been quietly putting his affairs in order, a process I couldn't bear to watch too closely because it felt like admitting defeat. "He said it was for everything important," I recalled slowly. "Digital copies of our wills, insurance policies, bank statements." He said, "If anything happens to me, Ellie,
Everything you need is in this box. My whole life is on that little stick." "Exactly," Charles said. He brought a copy of the drive to me to be stored in our firm's vault. It's standard practice for our clients. But he kept the original. Do you know where it is? Suddenly, a clear image flashed in my mind. A small carved wooden box he had bought on a trip to Vermont, one he kept in the back of his closet, on the top shelf behind a stack of old cashmere sweaters he never wore. I hadn't thought about it, let alone touched it, since the day I had packed away the last of his clothes. "I think so," I said, my heart starting to beat a little faster. It felt like a treasure map. "Find it," Charles advised, his voice firm. "Go through it carefully. Thomas was a planner. You know that. You never know what you might find. In the meantime, I'll have my paralegal draft a letter reinforcing your sole authority over the trust, just to have it ready in our arsenal. And Eleanor," he looked at me seriously, "do not engage with them. Don't answer their calls if you can help it. If you do, be brief, be tired, be non-committal. Not until we are ready." I left his office feeling like a general preparing for war. The fear and grief were still there, a cold stone in my gut, but now they were joined by a cold, clear purpose. That afternoon, I dragged the sturdy step stool into our walk-in closet, the familiar scent of Thomas's cedar and Old Spice still faintly lingering in the air. It was a scent that used to bring me comfort. Today, it brought me strength. I climbed the steps, reached behind the soft wall of sweaters, and my fingers brushed against the familiar smooth wood of the box. I brought it down and sat on the edge of our bed, the place we had shared for 45 years, a silent witness to our entire life together. With a deep breath, I lifted the lid, and inside, nestled on a bed of faded dark velvet, was a small, silver USB flash drive, a single heavy key to a safe deposit box, and a few sealed envelopes. One was addressed simply to Ellie. My hands trembled as I carefully slid it open. The letter wasn't long. It was Thomas's familiar, strong, slightly slanted handwriting. "My dearest Ellie, if you are reading this, it means I'm gone. I hope my passing was peaceful, and I hope you were there with me, holding my hand. There's so much I want to say, but I was never as good with words as you. You were the poet in our family. Just know this, my life's greatest joy, its single, unwavering purpose was you. You were my anchor, my compass, my home. I've tried to make things as easy as possible for you. This box contains our life, digitized and organized. Charles has copies of everything, but I wanted you to have the originals. Go through it when you're ready. There's a folder of video diaries from this last year. I'm not sure why I made them. I guess I just wanted to talk, to get my thoughts in order, and you were always my best audience."
Be strong, my love. You are the strongest woman I have ever known, even when you don't believe it yourself. Forever yours, Thomas. Tears blurred my vision, dripping onto the precious paper. I clutched the letter to my chest. He had called me strong. At that moment, I didn't feel strong at all, but I made a promise to him, a silent vow in the quiet of our sunlit bedroom I would be. For him. For me. I looked at the small silver USB drive. I wasn't ready to face those video diaries yet. Hearing his voice, seeing his face, it was too soon, too raw. I decided to start with the concrete, the factual. I needed to build my fortress of information before I could revisit the ghosts of my Furt. I took the drive to his old study, plugged it into my laptop, and a new, steely determination settled over me. It was time to see exactly what I was fighting for and exactly what my son was trying to steal. A few days passed in a strange, surreal limbo. On the surface, my life was unchanged. I watered my ferns, I talked to Sarah over the back fence about her prize-winning roses, I watched my game shows in the evening with a bowl of popcorn, but it all felt like a performance, a play I was acting in for an audience of one. Underneath, I was a woman on a mission. Every evening, after the sun went down, I would sit at Thomas's old oak desk,
the lamp casting a warm pool of light, and methodically go through the files on the USB drive. It was like an archaeological dig of our shared life. I saw the digital copy of our marriage certificate from 1978, our faces so young and impossibly hopeful. I saw the mortgage documents for our house, signed with trembling, excited hands. I saw the investment portfolios that Thomas had managed with a quiet, steady hand, turning a modest salary from his engineering job into a comfortable nest egg. I learned that we were more financially secure than I had ever realized. Thomas had been conservative, a man who believed in saving for a rainy day. He had been saving for my rainy day. The thought was a fresh stab of pain. This financial security, this lifetime of careful planning, was what my son and his wife saw as their personal lottery ticket. The call I had been dreading and expecting finally came on Friday afternoon. The caller ID flashed Michael. My hand tightened on the receiver. "Mom," he said, his voice oozing a manufactured warmth that made my skin crawl. "We're back. Chicago was a whirlwind. Vanessa killed her presentation, of course. We're exhausted. We were thinking of coming over for dinner tomorrow night if you're up for it. We miss you." The lies. So easy, so smooth. I took a breath, picturing the advice from Charles. Be brief, be tired. "Oh, that's nice, dear," I said, my voice carefully neutral, with just a hint of weariness. "But I'm not feeling my best this week, a bit under the weather. I think I just need to rest." There was a brief, calculated pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, could picture Vanessa beside him mouthing instructions. "Oh no! See, this is what we were worried about. You being all alone in that big house. It's too much for you. Maybe we should come over anyway, just to check on you, bring you some soup." "No, Michael, that's not necessary," I said, my tone firm, a mother's tone he couldn't argue with. "I'm fine, just tired. We'll talk next week." I hung up before he could argue, my heart pounding with a mixture of disgust and a strange, cold satisfaction. It had begun, their campaign to paint me as frail, forgetful, and unable to care for myself. The thought was terrifying, but it also solidified my resolve. They were following a script, and now I knew the lines. The next day, I forced myself to go to the grocery store. I needed milk, and more importantly, I needed to maintain the illusion of normalcy. As I was standing in the canned goods aisle, trying to decide between crushed and diced tomatoes for Sarah's chili recipe, I heard a hesitant voice behind me. "Mrs. Wilson?" I turned. It was Rachel, Vanessa's younger cousin. She was a quiet girl I'd only met a few times at various family holidays. She always seemed to be hovering in the background, overshadowed by her louder, more glamorous cousin. Today she looked flustered and unhappy, her shopping cart containing only a carton of fancy ice cream and a bottle of cheap red wine. A cart of sorrows, if I ever saw one. "Rachel, dear, how are you?" I asked, offering a small, gentle smile. I decided to take a chance. "You look a little down. Is everything all right?" She fidgeted with the strap of her purse, her eyes darting around the aisle. "I'm okay," she said, though her tone said otherwise. "It's just family stuff." I nodded sympathetically, placing a can of tomatoes in my cart. "I understand that. Families can be complicated." I looked at her kindly. "Vanessa can be a bit intense, can't she?" That was all it took. Her face crumpled slightly. "Intense doesn't even cover it," she muttered, then seemed to regret saying it. But the door was open. She took a shaky breath and leaned in closer, her voice a low, rushed whisper. "Look, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I feel terrible. Vanessa promised she'd help me pay off the last of my student loan if I helped her with a big project at her firm last year. I did, she got the credit, and now she's saying she can't afford it because she got passed over for a promotion she was counting on. A big one, with a huge salary increase. She's furious and desperate." I just listened, my expression carefully neutral, my heart pounding. This was it. The motive. Rachel, emboldened by silence, continued, the words spilling out in a rush of resentment.
She's been obsessed with finding a way to get money, and she's fixated on you. She said she needed to accelerate the timeline. She was talking about your house, about getting a lawyer to look for legal loopholes in the inheritance paperwork. She thinks it's her golden ticket to get out of the hole she's in. I just think you should know. Be careful. She's not just ambitious. When she doesn't get what she wants, she gets mean. Before I could respond, she gave me a pained, apologetic look, mumbled, "I have to go," and practically fled down the aisle, her cart rattling with its sad cargo. I stood there for a full minute, a can of diced tomatoes clutched in my hand, its metal edge digging into my palm. It was one thing to hear the plot myself from a distance, through an open window. It was another to have it confirmed, to hear the ugly, petty details. A missed promotion? A broken promise over a student loan? My home, my life, my husband's legacy was being weighed against such trivial, selfish grievances? Rachel's words, born of her own betrayal by Vanessa, had given me the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. An enemy's enemy, indeed. I put the can of tomatoes back on the shelf with a decisive click. My appetite was gone. But my determination had found a new, harder, sharper edge. They wanted to accelerate the timeline? Fine, so would I.
Armed with the raw, unvarnished truth from Rachel, I knew I couldn't remain passive. Waiting for them to make their next move felt like waiting for a guillotine to drop. I had to seize the initiative, to change the game from defense to offense. My first call on Monday morning was not to Charles Bennett, but to a name I had found in a folder on Thomas's USB drive, a folder labeled simply Estate Planning Aldridge. The name was Arthur Aldridge. The file was sparse, containing only a contact number and a short memo from Thomas. It described Mr. Aldridge as a private estate planner, a specialist in high-level asset protection. According to the notes, Thomas had hired him 2 years before his passing, completely separate from Charles, to create a more robust defense for his estate. The phrase sent a chill down my spine. Had Thomas suspected something specific back then? Or was this just his usual belt and suspenders nature, planning for a storm that might never come? I dialed the number, my finger hovering over the keypad for a moment before I pressed it. A crisp, professional voice answered on the first ring. "Office of Arthur Aldridge." "I'd like to speak with him, please," I said, my voice clear and steady. "My name is Eleanor Wilson. I'm the widow of a former client, Thomas Wilson." There was a brief, respectful pause, then, "One moment, Mrs. Wilson. I'll see if he's available." A few seconds later, a man's voice, calm, deep, and authoritative, came on the line. "Mrs. Wilson, Arthur Aldridge here. I was very sorry to hear of Tom's passing last year. He was a fine man and a sharp thinker. I've been waiting for your call." The words almost knocked the breath out of me. Waiting for my call? Tom was very specific, Mr. Aldridge explained, his tone matter-of-fact. He instructed me that under no circumstances was I to contact you directly. I was only to act if you reached out to me or if certain security flags on the estate's assets were tripped. He wanted you to have complete autonomy, but he also put a watchdog in place, me. I sank into a kitchen chair, my mind reeling. A watchdog. It seemed Thomas's foresight went deeper and darker than I had ever imagined. I took a breath and explained the situation to Mr. Aldridge, my voice steady and factual, recounting the events of the past week. He listened patiently, his silence a palpable form of attention, occasionally interjecting with a sharp, clarifying question. What was the exact date of this conversation? Did she mention a specific law firm? "I see," he said when I had finished. His voice was cold, stripped of any emotion except a kind of clinical anger. This is precisely the kind of contingency Tom was concerned about. He worried about Michael's susceptibility to outside influence. It was a delicate, professional way of saying I knew my son was weak. Tom once told me, "A good man with a weak will is a ship with a broken rudder. He'll go wherever the strongest wind blows him." "What do I do?" I asked, the question raw. "For now, you continue to do exactly what you are doing. You are the grieving widow who is feeling a bit under the weather. You are overwhelmed. Let them think they are in control of the narrative. In the meantime,
I am going to run a full, updated financial profile on Mr. and Mrs. Michael Wilson. We fight with facts, Mrs. Wilson. And, he added, his voice firm, there is a general welfare clause in the trust Tom and I structured. It is designed to protect you from harassment or any action that causes you undue distress. It gives you, as trustee, significant and discretionary power. Remember that. After the call, I felt a new layer of armor settle around me. I had a team. Charles was my legal shield, my public face of the law, and Mr. Aldridge was my hidden sword, ready to strike from the shadows. My next step was more personal, more strategic. It was time to set the bait. I waited until late in the afternoon, a time when I knew Michael would be home from work, stewing in his own financial desperation. I took a few deep breaths, summoning the image of a frail, confused old woman, the very woman they imagined me to be. Then I dialed his number. "Michael, dear," I said, intentionally putting a slight wavering tremor in my voice. "Mom? Are you okay? You sound weak." "Oh, I'm just so tired," I sighed, letting my voice crack a little. "This big house, it's just too much for me now, Michael. The stairs are a mountain, the yard work is endless. I was talking to Sarah, and maybe she's right. Maybe I should think about selling." The silence on the other end of the line was electric. It was a silence so profound I could hear his thoughts, his greed, his relief. I could picture him turning to Vanessa, his eyes wide, mouthing the word selling. "Selling," he finally said, trying and failing to keep the elation out of his voice. "Mom, that's a huge decision. You shouldn't rush into anything." I know, I said, playing my part to perfection. "But I'm so confused by all the paperwork. The deed, the property taxes, all of Thomas's old files. I wouldn't even know where to begin. I was thinking maybe you and Vanessa could come over this weekend. Help me go through it all. Your heads are so much clearer for this sort of thing." "Of course, Mom, absolutely," he gushed, the words tumbling over each other. "We'd be happy to help. It's the least we can do. You just rest. Don't you worry about a thing. We'll be there Saturday morning. We'll handle everything." I hung up the phone, the tremor in my voice gone, replaced by a chilling calm. The trap was set. They would walk into my house on Saturday, believing they were vultures circling a dying animal, ready to pick the bones clean. They had no idea they were walking into the spider's web. And I, the supposedly frail and forgetful old spider, would be waiting. The scene shifts. It's Friday night at Michael and Vanessa's house, a space decorated in shades of gray and chrome that always felt cold and impersonal to me. The air inside is thick with a tension that has nothing to do with me. A stack of angry-looking red and white envelopes sits on their granite countertop, a silent monument to their financial desperation. Vanessa is pacing the length of the kitchen, a glass of white wine in her hand, her movements sharp and agitated. Michael is staring at the offending pile of bills as if he could make them disappear through sheer force of will. "I can't believe this," Vanessa says, her voice a low, furious hiss. "First, I get passed over for the director promotion. Greg got it, Michael. Greg, the man who thinks Synergy is a brand of yogurt. After all the extra hours I put in, all the weekends I sacrificed, my salary is stuck. Then your car needs a new transmission, which costs a fortune, and now the bank is sending us these letters threatening foreclosure. How did we let it get this bad?" Michael runs a hand through his thinning hair, a gesture I've seen him use since he was a teenager facing a bad report card. "I don't know, V. The market's been tough since the pandemic. The business, it's not what it used to be." He looks small, defeated, a man drowning in slow motion. "Maybe I should just look for a regular job, something with a steady salary, benefits."
Vanessa stops pacing and whirls on him, her eyes blazing. "Don't you dare say that. Don't you dare talk about giving up. After everything we've put into your company, after all the sacrifices I've made, we are not quitters." She takes a gulp of wine, the gesture more aggressive than relaxing. Her eyes have a feverish, unsettling gleam. "This is why your mother's timing is a gift from God, a miracle." Michael flinches, physically recoiling from her words. "Don't say that. It sounds awful. It's my mother we're talking about." It's the truth, and you know it, she insists, her voice dropping, becoming persuasive, hypnotic. She called you. She's the one who suggested selling. We're not forcing her. We are helping her. She's old, she's lonely, and she's sitting on a gold mine that she does nothing with. It's not fair for one person to have all that security while we're drowning in debt. It's her home, Vanessa. It's where I grew up, he says again, but his voice is weaker this time, the protest flimsy. He's starting to believe the narrative she's weaving, the comforting lie that allows him to see himself not as a villain, but as a pragmatic son. And we will make sure she has a new home, Vanessa says, soothingly, coming over and placing a hand on his shoulder, her touch a strange mix of comfort and control. A lovely one at Oakwood Meadows. She'll have friends her own age, activities, 3 meals a day she doesn't have to cook. Think of it, Michael. We'll be doing her a favor. And we, she says, her voice dropping to a whisper, will finally be free of all this. She gestures at the pile of bills. No more debt, no more sleepless nights. A new start. A real life. Isn't that what you want? For us? He looks from the angry red envelopes to his wife's determined, beautiful face. He thinks about the shame of his failing business, the gnawing fear of telling Vanessa just how bad things really are. He thinks about the easy solution, the clean slate, the escape hatch dangling right in front of him. All it would cost is his mother's home, his mother's trust, his soul. It seems, in that moment of desperation, like a bargain. He nods, slowly at first, then more firmly, his conscience giving way. You're right, he says, his voice resolved. We're helping her. It's for the best, for everyone. Vanessa smiles, a slow, triumphant, predatory smile that doesn't reach her eyes. She raises her glass. To new beginnings, she says, the toast a dark promise. Michael raises his water glass and clinks it against hers, the sound small and hollow in the quiet room. To new beginnings. They have no idea what kind of beginning they are about to set in motion. They believe they are planning a quiet, orderly coup. They are actually planning their own spectacular demise. Saturday morning arrived, gray and overcast, the sky a perfect mirror for my mood. I had been up since dawn, not sleeping, but preparing, like a soldier before a battle. I showered and dressed carefully in a simple navy blue dress and the single string of pearls Thomas had given me for our 30th anniversary. They were real, classic, and understated. I wanted to look composed, dignified, untouchable. This was not a day for weakness or sentimentality. They're supposed to arrive at 10. At 9:30, I made my move. The element of surprise, I had decided, was crucial. I got in my car and drove not to a cafe to wait, but to their house on Sycamore Lane. I had my own key, one Michael had given me years ago for emergencies. This, I thought with a grim sense of irony, certainly qualified as one. I parked down the street, walked up their pristine concrete path, and let myself in quietly. The house was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. And then I saw it, spread across their sleek glass and chrome coffee table, as if they were a team of executives planning a corporate takeover, were the blueprints of my life. My bank statements, which they must have taken from my mail, a copy of my will that I didn't even know they had, probably pilfered from my desk months ago, property tax records, and laid out like a centerpiece was a glossy trifold brochure for Oakwood Meadows, a smiling, silver-haired couple on the cover looking blissfully content in their managed decline. A wave of hot, acrid nausea washed over me, but I swallowed it down. I stood there, in the center of their cold, stylish living room, a ghost at my own dismemberment. This was no longer a suspicion overheard from a window. This was the cold, hard, paper and ink proof of their premeditated betrayal. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Michael appeared first, still in his pajama pants and a wrinkled t-shirt, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He saw me and froze mid-yawn, his face a comical mask of shock and guilt. Mom, what are you doing here? I thought we were coming to you at 10. Vanessa appeared behind him, pulling her expensive-looking silk robe tighter around her. Her eyes, sharp and quick, darted from my face to the coffee table, and for a split second, I saw raw, undiluted panic flash across her features before it was expertly replaced by a smooth, plastic smile.
Eleanor, what a surprise, she said, her voice a little too bright, a little too loud. We were just getting some things together to bring over. We wanted to be prepared to make things easier for you. You know, get a head start on all this confusing paperwork. I didn't look at her. I refused to grant her that much power. I kept my eyes fixed on my son, the boy I had raised. Easier for me, Michael? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet, each word carefully chosen and placed. Easier? I gestured with my chin towards the brochure on the table. Oakwood Meadows. It looks lovely. Did you pick out a room for me already? One with a nice view of the parking lot, perhaps? Michael's face went from pale to a deep, blotchy red. He stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. Mom, it's not... We were just looking at options for the future. We're worried about you. You said yourself the house was too much. Worried about me, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. You were so worried you lied about being in Chicago for a week. You were so worried you've been stealing my mail and going through my private papers? Tell me, Michael, what percentage of this, I swept my hand over the table, is about your concern for me, and what percentage is about the numbers on these bank statements? He had no answer. He just stood there, a deer caught in the blinding headlights of his own deceit, a 42-year-old man-child exposed and speechless. Vanessa, however, was a fighter. She recovered quickly, stepping forward to take control, ever the manipulator. Eleanor, you're clearly upset, and we understand. This is a difficult conversation. It's emotional. Perhaps we should all sit down and talk about this calmly. We only want what's best for you. A friend of mine at work, her mother had a terrible time after her husband's funeral, and her son had to fight his own sister for custody of the estate just to protect her mother from making bad decisions. We don't want that kind of conflict for our family. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of her, twisting the narrative, painting themselves as the saviors in a drama of her own creation, was almost admirable in its wickedness. I was about to respond, to finally unleash the torrent of rage and pain I had been holding back for a week, when the doorbell rang.
The sharp, clean chime cut through the thick, toxic tension in the room like a surgeon's scalpel. We all froze. Michael, visibly grateful for the interruption, scurried to the door. He opened it, and his jaw dropped. Standing on his pristine doorstep, immaculate in a perfectly tailored gray suit and carrying a slim leather briefcase, was Mr. Arthur Aldridge. This part of the plan had been my own addition, a stroke of inspiration born from a long, sleepless night. I hadn't told Mr. Aldridge to simply show up. That felt too staged, too much like a television drama where everything happens by convenient coincidence. The real power, I had realized, lay in making them believe I had been caught by a system, a silent, watchful mechanism they didn't even know existed. The illusion of my own frailty was paramount. Mr. Aldridge looked past Michael's stunned, gaping face and focused his calm, intelligent eyes directly on me. "Mrs. Wilson, good morning," he said, his voice the epitome of calm professionalism. "I apologize for the intrusion." Vanessa had now joined Michael at the door, her face a carefully constructed mask of confusion and alarm. "I'm sorry, who are you?" she asked, her practiced hostess smile looking brittle and fake. "My name is Arthur Aldridge," he said, stepping past them into the foyer as if he owned the place, forcing them to back away. "I am the private estate planner for the Thomas Wilson Trust." The word private hung in the air, heavy with implication. I saw a flicker of genuine confusion in Michael's eyes. He knew Charles Bennett. He had never in his life heard the name Arthur Aldridge. "I don't understand," Michael said, closing the door, his voice weak. "My father's lawyer is Charles Bennett." "Mr. Bennett is the family attorney, responsible for standard probate matters," Mr. Aldridge corrected him smoothly, not even glancing at him. "My firm handles asset protection and risk management for the trust.
And I am here because a security flag was tripped on the estate's primary asset less than an hour ago. He finally turned his gaze to the coffee table, his eyes sweeping over the scattered documents. A flag related to unauthorized inquiries into the property's legal status and title history. Vanessa's face went white. This was a development she could not have anticipated, a variable she couldn't control. There was no way she could talk her way out of a security flag. It sounded official, inescapable, and terrifyingly modern. This was my moment to complete the scene. I took a step forward, feigning a weary confusion that I did not feel, pressing my hand to my forehead as if staving off a headache. Oh dear, this is all so complicated. A security flag. Michael, Vanessa, since Mr. Aldridge is here, and you are both so concerned about my affairs, perhaps we should all have that calm talk you suggested just a moment ago. I had them. I had backed them into a corner so perfectly that they couldn't refuse without looking guilty as sin. Vanessa, ever the performer, pasted on a concerned smile, though it didn't reach her panicked eyes. Of course! Please, Mr. Aldridge, come in. We were just helping Eleanor organize some of her old paperwork. It's all so overwhelming for her. Mr. Aldridge gave a curt, dismissive nod and walked into the living room. He placed his briefcase on a side table with a soft, definitive click. His eyes swept over the documents on their coffee table with an expert's cool disdain. He was in complete control of the room, of the situation, of them. Well, he said, turning to face them, his voice as crisp and cool as the gray morning outside. Since we are all here to help, Mrs. Wilson, let's start by clarifying a few things about the estate you seem so interested in. The trap had not just been sprung, it had been reinforced with steel bars. They looked back and forth between me, the supposedly confused old woman, and this powerful, unexpected stranger, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw real, undiluted fear in their eyes. The hunters had become the hunted. We all sat down, though no one, perhaps except Mr. Aldridge, looked comfortable. I took the plush armchair, my rightful place as the matriarch of a family now at war. Michael and Vanessa perched on the edge of their modern, uncomfortable-looking sofa, like two nervous birds on a wire. Mr. Aldridge remained standing, a commanding presence, a judge in a courtroom of his own making. He opened his briefcase with a series of sharp, definitive clicks that echoed in the tense silence. Let's begin with the primary asset. The house, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument or interruption. The property at 124 Willow Creek Lane is held in a specially structured irrevocable trust established by Mr. Thomas Wilson in 2020. The sole trustee, with absolute and indisputable authority over any and all decisions regarding the property, is Mrs. Eleanor Wilson. He slid a single, elegantly printed document across the table toward them. This is a legally binding summary for your reference. As you can see, no sale, transfer, or lien can be placed upon the property without Mrs. Wilson's express, written, and notarized consent. Furthermore, he continued, his voice hardening slightly, any attempt to declare the trustee incapacitated requires the concurring, independent agreement of 3 separate board-certified neurologists and a subsequent court order. A process, I assure you, is both lengthy, invasive, and extraordinarily expensive. Vanessa stared at the paper as if it were written in a foreign language. Her entire plan, so simple and elegant in her mind, had just run into a legal brick wall forged by a man who had been dead for 3 years. But Mr. Aldridge wasn't finished. He pulled out another folder, this one thicker. Now, while we're discussing finances, he continued, his cool gaze shifting to Michael, who seemed to shrink under the weight of it,
As the manager of the trust, it is also my duty to monitor any potential risks to the estate's beneficiaries. This includes assessing the financial stability of named secondary beneficiaries. To that end, my office ran an updated financial profile. He laid out another set of papers, a series of spreadsheets and official-looking letters. It appears, Mr. Wilson, that your consulting business is currently operating at a significant loss and has been for 3 consecutive quarters. Furthermore, you and your wife are 4 months behind on your mortgage payments for this house and are carrying a debt of over $60,000 on multiple high-interest credit cards. The silence in the room was deafening. The air crackled with the static of shame and exposure. Michael couldn't even look at me. He stared at the floor, his face burning with a deep, painful humiliation. Vanessa's carefully constructed mask of sophistication finally shattered. Her face, stripped of its confident smirk, looked pinched and ugly. Their noble motive of helping Mom was laid bare for what it was, the desperate, grubby greed of 2 people living far beyond their means. This was the moment. I had brought them to their knees with facts and figures. Now it was time for the emotional coup de grace. It was time to show them that they had underestimated not only me, but the man I had married. "That's not all Thomas left for me," I said, my voice cutting through the thick silence. I reached into my handbag and pulled out the small, silver USB drive. I held it up between my thumb and forefinger. It looked so small, so insignificant, but in that room it felt like a bomb. "Your father was a man who believed in keeping records, Michael." I looked directly at my son, forcing him to meet my gaze. He started making video diaries in his final year. He talked about his life, his regrets, his worries. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in, watching the flicker of panic in his eyes. He talked a lot about his worries for you, about your character, about your choices.
The last vestiges of color drained from Michael's face. Vanessa stared at the USB drive as if it were a venomous snake, poised to strike. They didn't know what was on it. They only know that it was a secret, a piece of Thomas they had never known, a judgment from beyond the grave, and it was now in my hands. I stood up, the power in the room now firmly, completely mine. "I will be freezing all non-essential financial support from the trust, effective immediately," I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. I looked at my son, at the stranger sitting on the sofa who wore his face. "I will not speak to either of you again. When you are ready to have an honest conversation, Michael, a truly honest one, about what you have done, alone, without her," I nodded briefly and dismissively toward Vanessa. "You know where to find me." I walked to the door with a straight back and a steady stride. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel their world, their carefully constructed fantasy of an easy inheritance, collapsing into dust behind me. I had walked into their house a victim. I was walking out a victor. Back in the sanctuary of my own home, the adrenaline that had coursed through my veins began to fade, leaving a profound, bone-deep exhaustion in its wake. But it was the clean exhaustion of a battle won, not the heavy weariness of defeat. I made myself a cup of Earl Grey tea, my hands steady for the first time in days, and sat down at Thomas's desk. The confrontation was over, but the reckoning was not. It was time to face the ghosts. I plugged the small silver USB drive into my laptop. My heart hammered against my ribs as I navigated to the folder labeled Video Diaries. There were dozens of files, dated sequentially, a chronicle of the last year of his life. With a trembling finger, I clicked on the first one. And there he was, my Thomas. He was sitting in his favorite armchair, the worn, comfortable leather one that was sitting empty across the room from me right now. He looked thinner than I remembered. The illness had already begun its cruel, invisible work, but his eyes were the same, clear, intelligent, and filled with a deep, abiding love that even a camera lens couldn't diminish.
Is this thing on? He chuckled, tapping the camera, a small smile playing on his lips. Well, here goes nothing. Ellie, if you're watching this, you've probably figured out my ridiculously simple password. Go Buckeyes 76. Not very creative for an engineer, I know. His smile faded slightly. I don't know why I'm doing this. I guess I have things to say, and it's hard to say them to your face. It makes it all too real, this whole leaving business. But you were always my best audience, so here I am. I watched for hours, mesmerized. I watched him talk about our life together, recounting funny stories from our early married years that I had long forgotten. I watched him talk about his pride in his work, about his quiet love for fly fishing in the streams of North Carolina, about his frustration with the state of politics. It was like having him back for a few precious hours. And then I came to the videos from the last few months. His tone began to change. The easygoing chronicle became more focused, more urgent. In one video, dated in late August, he looked weary, the lines around his eyes deeper. I had lunch with Michael today, he said, sighing, running a hand over his face. He was talking about a new business venture, some tech startup, needs another loan to get it off the ground. The boy has dreams, Ellie, big dreams. But he doesn't have discipline. He wants the success without the struggle. And that wife of his, Vanessa, she has ambition enough for 10 people, but she has no heart. She looks at me, at this house, at you, and I don't see affection in her eyes. I see calculation. I see an inventory being taken. It worries me, Ellie. It worries me what will happen when I'm not here to be your buffer, your shield. Tears streamed down my face, dripping unheeded onto my blouse. He had seen it. He had seen the darkness I had been blind to, the character flaws I had made excuses for my entire life out of a mother's misguided love. He had known, and he had worried. I clicked on the final video, dated just 1 week before he was hospitalized for the last time. He looked frail, a shadow of the strong men I had married, but his voice was firm, imbued with a final, determined purpose. Ellie, I've done something. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd protest, say we didn't need it, but I needed to, for my own peace of mind. I had Aldridge set up a separate account, a rainy day fund, just for you. It's in your name alone, completely separate from the main trust. It's yours. There's $450,000 in it. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. Don't argue, he said, a faint smile touching his lips as if he could hear my silent protest. You earned every penny of it 1,000 times over. It's the salary you never got for being the CEO of our lives. I also bought a small property, a condominium down in Naples, Florida, right on the beach. I always knew you loved the ocean. I bought it last year. It's paid in full. The deed is in the safe deposit box. The key is in your legacy box. It's yours. He took a ragged breath, the effort costing him. This isn't about controlling you from the grave, Ellie. This is about giving you freedom, your own freedom, to go, to stay, to travel, to do whatever your heart desires without having to ask anyone for permission. Don't let anyone, not even Michael, make you feel small or dependent. You are the strongest person I know. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. I love you. Always. The video ended, the screen going black. I sat in the profound silence, the sound of his voice echoing in the room, in my heart. He had given me more than a home and financial security. He had given me a validation of my worth, a testament to his unwavering love, and a final, powerful, priceless gift, permission to choose my own future. I felt a surge of strength, of purpose. I opened another folder on the drive, the one labeled Aldridge Trust Protocols. Inside was a document detailing the general welfare clause Mr. Aldrich had mentioned. It was written in dense, impenetrable legalese, but the intent, as I read it now, was crystal clear. It gave the trustee, me, broad and discretionary powers to act against any party whose actions caused emotional distress, harassment, or financial instability to the primary beneficiary. Thomas and Aldridge had forged a shield for me. It was now up to me to wield it as a sword.
A week later, just as Mr. Aldridge had predicted, I was served with legal papers. A nervous-looking young man in an ill-fitting suit handed me an envelope, mumbling an apology. Michael, in a final, desperate act of foolishness and arrogance, had filed a petition with the probate court. He was seeking to have me declared mentally incompetent and to have himself appointed as my legal guardian and the new trustee of the estate. The petition itself was a work of fiction. It was filled with lies and half-truths, twisted anecdotes, and blatant falsehoods. It claimed I was showing advanced signs of dementia, that I was dangerously forgetful, and that I was being manipulated by new and unfamiliar outside parties, a clear and clumsy reference to Mr. Aldridge. It was a declaration of total war, and I was ready.
The court hearing was held in a small, sterile room at the county courthouse that felt cold and airless. Michael and Vanessa sat on one side with their harried-looking lawyer, a man who looked like he regretted taking the case. They were dressed in somber colors, trying to project an image of worried, responsible children. I sat on the other side with Charles Bennett and Mr. Aldridge, a formidable wall of legal power. Michael wouldn't look at me. He stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, a muscle twitching in his cheek. His lawyer went first, his voice droning on as he painted a picture of a concerned son, deeply worried about his aging, confused mother. He presented a statement from a doctor Michael had once taken me to for a routine checkup, who noted I seemed a bit tired and distracted. It was pathetic, and I could see the judge, a stern-faced woman in her 50s with intelligent, no-nonsense eyes, was already looking impatient. Then it was our turn. Charles Bennett stood up, his presence calm and authoritative. "Your Honor," he began, his voice filling the small room, "we will not waste the court's time by dignifying these baseless and offensive claims with a lengthy rebuttal. We will instead present 3 pieces of evidence that will illustrate the true nature of this petition." First, he presented the detailed financial report from Mr. Aldridge's office outlining Michael and Vanessa's dire financial situation, their mountain of debt, and their documented attempts to access my assets. He submitted it as Exhibit A. The judge read the summary, her eyebrows rising slightly. Second, he called a surprise witness. The defense calls Rachel Stone to the stand. Rachel, Vanessa's cousin, walked nervously to the stand, refusing to look at Vanessa. In a quiet but clear voice, prompted by Charles's gentle questions, she recounted how Vanessa had boasted about her plan to secure my house to solve her financial problems after being passed over for a promotion. She said it was Plan B. She said her mother-in-law was sitting on a gold mine and didn't even know it. Vanessa shot her a look of pure venom from across the room, a look that did not go unnoticed by the judge. "Finally," Charles said, "and for our final piece of evidence, Your Honor, we would like to play a short audio recording." He placed a small digital recorder on the table in front of the microphone. He pressed play. My own voice filled the room, frail and wavering from the phone call I had made to Michael. "I was thinking, maybe I should think about selling." Then came Michael's voice, not concerned, but tripping over itself with barely concealed excitement. "Of course, Mom! Absolutely! We'd be happy to help. We'll handle everything." The judge listened, her expression unreadable, her fingers steepled in front of her. "Your Honor," he said, his voice ringing with conviction, "this is not the voice of a son worried about his mother's mental state. This is the voice of an opportunist hearing the opening of a cash register. The petitioner's only concern is his mother's bank account. This entire proceeding is an attempt at elder financial abuse cloaked in the language of concern." He sat down. The judge looked over her glasses at Michael, her gaze sharp and penetrating. "Mr. Wilson," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "do you have anything to say in response to this?" Michael just shook his head, looking utterly defeated.
a man hollowed out by his own greed. The judge's gavel came down with a sharp, explosive crack that made everyone jump. This petition is not only dismissed, it is an offense to this court's time and a clear, malicious abuse of the legal process. I am sanctioning the petitioner and his counsel for filing a frivolous lawsuit. You will be responsible for Mrs. Wilson's full legal fees. Case dismissed. It was over. The public humiliation, the final, undeniable defeat, was complete. As we filed out of the courtroom, Vanessa shot me a look of pure hatred. Michael just looked broken. And in that moment, looking at the wreckage of the son I had raised, I felt nothing for them. Not pity, not anger, not even the satisfaction of victory. Just a vast, quiet emptiness. The final tie had been severed by the judge's gavel. In the 6 months that followed, I remade my life from the ground up. Following the instructions Thomas had left and the expert advice of Mr. Aldridge, I put the house on Willow Creek Lane, our house, the house of our memories, up for sale. It sold quickly to a young family with 2 small children whose laughter I could already imagine echoing in the halls. It felt right. With a significant portion of the proceeds, and on the advice of Mr. Aldridge, I established the Thomas Wilson Foundation, a charitable trust dedicated to providing pro bono legal support for senior citizens facing guardianship abuse and financial exploitation. The house of our memories would now be a house of hope and protection for others. And then I moved. I packed my most cherished belongings, Thomas's worn leather armchair, our family photos, his favorite books, the wooden box that held his legacy, and I moved to the condominium in Naples, Florida. It was beautiful, a spacious 2-bedroom apartment with a wide, sun-drenched balcony overlooking the turquoise waters of the Gulf of Mexico. The first morning, I woke up not to the sound of my alarm clock, but to the cries of seagulls and the gentle, rhythmic shushing of the waves on the shore. I made a cup of coffee and sat on the balcony, wrapped in a light robe, watching the sunrise paint the sky in impossible shades of pink and orange. The air was warm and smelled of salt and flowers and possibility. A lifetime of cold, gray Ohio winters seemed to melt away from my bones. I was no longer just a widow, a mother, a victim. I was Eleanor, and my life, for the first time, was completely and utterly my own. I found a new rhythm, a new routine. I joined a book club that met at a local cafe. I took a pottery class, delighting in the simple, messy act of creating something with my own hands. I learned the names of my neighbors, wonderful people from all over the country, a retired teacher from Vermont, a former pilot from Texas, who, like me, were starting a new chapter. We played bridge on Thursdays and had potluck dinners on Saturdays. One afternoon, I was checking my mail in the lobby and found a simple, white envelope with no return address, postmarked from Columbus, Ohio. My breath caught in my throat. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a personal check for $200, drawn on a new bank account I didn't recognize. Tucked in with it was a small piece of notepaper, folded in half. On it were 5 words, written in Michael's familiar, messy script. "This is the first payment." That was all. No apology, no excuses, no pleas for forgiveness. Just a simple, stark acknowledgement of a debt. The first small step on what I knew would be a long, arduous road. I held the check in my hand for a long time. I didn't know if I would ever cash it. I didn't know if I could ever truly forgive him, or if our relationship, so profoundly broken, could ever be repaired. Some things, once shattered, can never be made whole again. But as I stood there, the warm Florida sun on my face, looking out at the endless, sparkling expanse of the ocean, a sense of profound peace settled over me. His journey of atonement was his own to walk. My journey was here, in the sun, with the sound of the waves as my constant companion. I had not only won a battle for a house, I had won back my life. And that was an inheritance more valuable than any trust fund, more precious than any property. It was everything.